J.K. Rowling destroys woke culture.
The J.K. Rowling and Ricky Gervais have proved that if you stand up to the woke, eventually you win. J.K. Rowling's book sales went from $7 million to $11.9 million worth last year. This despite the fact she was attacked by trans activists because she said that women deserve their own private spaces.
You heard that right. J.K. Rowling has found herself in the middle of a cultural firestorm. Why?
Humza Yousaf has faced fierce backlash over Scotland's new hate crime law, which fails to protect women. One woman who hasn't been afraid to challenge the First Minister over the new law is best-selling author J.K. Rowling, who's publicly been calling out the hypocrisy around this law, as well as pointing out her concerns over what they mean for free speech and who they really protect.
She dared to speak out against woke culture and its effects on free speech. But what has she really said that has the world so divided?
Very good one. Scotland's new hate crime laws were expected to meet a backlash. And here it was on day one. Protesters gathered outside Holyrood, voicing concern with a bill they say stifles free speech and can be exploited by those looking to silence particular groups. Among those angered are the author J.K. Rowling. In a thread on X, formerly known as Twitter, she lists a number of high-profile controversies involving trans women before questioning their gender.
In Rowling's eyes, the message is clear. It's time to push back against the ideologies she believes are undermining women's rights. Do you think these issues are worth speaking up for, or should people stay quiet to avoid backlash?
Harry Potter came to me on a train in 1990. I was sitting just staring out of the window and the idea just fell out of nowhere. It was the purest stroke of inspiration I've ever had in my life. And I've been writing about him ever since.
The Harry Potter legend, who used to be endeared to the West due to her creative works, which have shaped a lot of the modern film industry, has suddenly been declared an enemy of the woke mob due to her stance against woke beliefs, which she claims are harmful for women and society. Before we dive deeper, make sure to subscribe to stay updated on the most unfiltered celebrity moments and the biggest conversations pushing back against woke culture.
Scotland's new hate crime laws have come into force, but why are some people calling it controversial? The Hate Crime and Public Order Act came into effect on Monday the 1st of April, aiming to tackle the harm caused by hatred and prejudice towards people with certain characteristics, including religion, sexual orientation and transgender identity. Supporters of the new bill insist that it will make Scotland more tolerant, but opponents have argued that it will stifle free speech and could even be weaponised to settle scores.
This all began with J.K. Rowling's take on Scotland's new hate speech laws, introduced by First Minister Humza Yousaf. Rowling argues that these laws, under the guise of protecting gender minorities, actually prioritize trans women at the expense of biological women's rights. But what exactly did she say about these laws that sparked such public outrage? Let's find out.
Freedom of speech and belief are at the end in Scotland if the accurate description of biological sex is deemed criminal. I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offence under the terms of the new Act, I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment.
J.K. Rowling has called out the fact that transgender women are given precedence over biological women, who are the overwhelming majority of actual women in existence. J.K. Rowling hasn't held back in her criticism of laws she says undermine women's rights.
Well, it seems J.K. Rowling continues to find herself in the middle of cancel culture after organisers of a New Zealand book festival decided to drop a Harry Potter quiz from the lineup because of the author's comments on transgender people. Organisers of the Featherston Book Town Kakatea Festival in New Zealand decided to cancel the Harry Potter quiz, which was considered to be quite popular at the festival because they were worried J.K. Rowling's comments offended people. The iconic author has been accused of spreading transphobia before.
Despite relentless media backlash, she stands her ground, unapologetic and unafraid. Despite intense backlash, Rowling's influence only grows. Her book sales skyrocketed from 7 million to nearly 2 billion, proof that public demand for her work remains unshaken. The backlash became so severe that even Harry Potter stars like Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson came out to stand against J.K. Rowling so as not to offend the woke left. And this left the esteemed author in shock. But it did not in any way change her views, as Rowling has maintained her stand against the whole movement.
Celebs who cozied up to a movement intent on eroding women's hard-won rights and who use their platform to cheer on the transitioning of minors can save their apologies for traumatised detransitioners and vulnerable women reliant on single-sex spaces.
Rowling believes detransitioning minors suffer most, claiming they were failed by a medical system that pushed irreversible treatments too early, long before they could fully understand their choices. Do you think celebrities should comment on social issues or keep quiet?
Angela Carini doesn't want to speak. She was heard saying inside that this fight is unjust. It's already being seen as one of the most contentious contests ever at an Olympics.
Recently, it was this Australian boxer facing Khalif.
It's not fair to target an individual. It's not fair to put other people at risk. So, it needs to be held. The conversation needs to be held at the highest level.
Olympic organisers fear a witch hunt, insisting if it says female in your passport, you can compete as a woman.
The testosterone is not a perfect test. Many women can have testosterone which is in what would be called male levels.
Rowling is outspoken on trans issues in sports, arguing that this movement endangers biological women, robbing them of fair competition and hard-won victories.
An Olympic controversy feared and foreseen. Punches as ferocious as the row. A bout that faced calls to be blocked, and in the end was abandoned after just 46 seconds. Italian Angela Carini could take no more, feeling unfairly overpowered by Iman Khalif. Why this attempt to offer consolation was rejected. The Algerian cleared to compete in Paris despite being disqualified from the World Championships last year after failing an unspecified gender eligibility test.
In the just-ended Olympics Games, J.K. Rowling demolished the entire Olympic safety regulatory bodies for what she felt was the disgraceful way women's safety was being handled during the Games. J.K. Rowling slammed the Olympics, calling them a misogynistic establishment, and called out the trans player who she accused of enjoying the distress of the woman who he just punched in the face during their match. J.K. Rowling has entered the spotlight recently, not only for her groundbreaking contributions to literature and academia, but she has also become the target of a heavily organized woke army, which have even gone as far as asking for her arrest on multiple occasions.
Testosterone is not a perfect test. Many women can have testosterone which is in what would be called male levels, and still be women and still compete as women. So this panacea, this idea that suddenly you do one test for testosterone and that sorts everything out, not the case, I'm afraid.
Despite the waves of attacks launched at the literature legend, J.K. Rowling has remained completely deviant and has no intentions of cowering to the dictates of the leftist woke army, which has threatened her with all and sundry.
This is J.K. Rowling, the creator of Harry Potter, of course, who sparked outrage last weekend with a series of controversial tweets about trans women. She's now written an essay on her blog addressing the accusations and saying her opinions stem from her own experience with domestic violence. That's why she's been pushed to advocate for women's rights. J.K. Rowling has been very dismissive of the allegations of hate crime and transphobia brought against her. To Rowling, what matters most is the defense of women's rights, and she has no intentions whatsoever to cower to this pandering of the woke left.
Creating a more equal post-COVID-19 world for people who menstruate. And she responded by saying, I'm sure there is a word for these people, followed by a number of deliberately misspelled versions of the word woman. Now, there was instant backlash to that. She was accused of being transphobic, so she wanted to further clarify herself.
J.K. Rowling and her supporters have taken to Twitter and other social media platforms to defend her stance against trans ideologies and the host of other woke ideas.
That one said, quote, "I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth." Now, again, as you mentioned, an essay. She's trying to explain herself further, a lengthy essay, saying her position in part comes from being a victim of both domestic and sexual abuse. And what she says is in mentioning these things now is not in an attempt to garner sympathy.
J.K. Rowling has also on many occasions stood up for the plight of minors who are way below the age of consent, but are being subjected to the so-called gender-affirming surgery, which according to J.K. Rowling is completely insane and unacceptable.
It can be incredibly stressful, and there are young people who are going through real anguish, actually, in relation to this. And I'm not going to join those that just want to add to the abuse of that small group of people.
Rowling believes that it is beyond careless to subject minors to puberty blockers and other treatments, which includes the infamous gender-affirming surgery, which has led to a lot of complications to the lives of the minors subjected to this treatment. Should minors have access to these treatments? Drop your thoughts in the comment.
Do you feel sorry for J.K. Rowling and her position on this?
Look, I respect her position on this. People do take different positions on this.
J.K. Rowling has made it through the lawsuits, social media cancellations, and calls for her arrest. And of recent, the iconic Rowling has continued to sell more books at shocking rates. And one of those recent books came under a lot of fire from trans activists who began sending death threats because they believed the book was targeted against the trans community.
A hashtag reading RIP J.K. Rowling, as we said earlier, has been trending on Twitter. Harry Potter author has not died, but is the latest victim of cancel culture.
It comes because of her new book. It is said to feature a male serial killer who dresses in women's clothing. It's divided opinion.
The RIP J.K. Rowling hashtag was trending on social media as comments about her new books were all claiming that she wrote against the trans community. Although Rowling never came out to talk on live television about this, the subject was heavily discussed in the Good Morning Britain show, featuring Piers Morgan, who seemed frustrated at the attacks meted out against J.K. Rowling. Do you think it's fair for someone to face backlash just for their views?
Why J.K. Rowling is in this mess?
Well, J.K. Rowling has been tweeting derogatory comments about trans people for some months now. Some years she's been suggesting her anti-trans views. And she has reportedly, her new book under a male name indeed, features a character who dresses as a woman in order to kill. And a lot of people, myself included, are incredibly worried about how that smears trans people.
Piers Morgan is someone who is known for his anti-woke views, especially on trans culture and gender-affirming surgery. His views has always aligned with that of J.K. Rowling, and he sought to defend her throughout the interview after giving the trans activist on the show the chance to speak.
A man who dresses as a woman in order to kill.
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah.
transgender person.
According to the reviews, this person is a transvestite. The truth is that for a lot of people...
But a transvestite is not necessarily a transgender person, but you're saying this is an example of hate against transgender people, even though it's not a transgender person.
I am indeed, because in a lot of people's minds who are not familiar with the distinctions of trans people with these issues and may have seen J.K. Rowling's other derogatory comments against trans people, this will be seen as a way to debase them.
Piers Morgan provided proof of a review of J.K. Rowling's book from a credible source that made the claims of the woke mob completely unreasonable, because he discovered that after close inspection of J.K. Rowling's recent book, no evidence of transphobia was found in it, and he made sure to point this out to the trans activist.
You haven't read the book, have you?
No, nobody's read the book besides a handful of...
And do you support the RIP J.K. Rowling hashtag?
I mean, I think if there's any sense of the people among those hashtags that were saying, death threats or that she should be something like dead, that is clearly unbelievably unacceptable.
What would you like to happen to her then?
Well, what I would like is for people to not buy this book, for people to challenge J.K. Rowling on her views.
The tension during the interview became more visible when it was clear that the woke mob was out to get J.K. Rowling, not because of any transphobic content on any of her books, but because of her bold comments against the woke mob in recent times. Have you ever seen a situation where criticism didn't match reality?
You haven't read. Nick Cohen, who is a top liberal left writer, has written a piece for The Spectator. J.K. Rowling's latest novel, which he's read, is not remotely transphobic. If you actually read it, it doesn't have any transphobia in it.
If you're passionate about these issues, subscribe and join us as we bring you the latest unfiltered moments and conversations. Don't miss out.